I never imagined my life would come to this, a morning clouded with betrayal in my own kitchen. The Tennessee sun had barely begun to climb the hills, spilling gold across the porch where I often sat with my coffee, savoring the quiet. Today, though the quiet was shattered, he stormed in, my son-in-law, his face red with frustration, his eyes sharp and accusing. "You eat, but you don't help," he shouted, and before I could respond, the cup in his hand flew toward me. Hot coffee splashed across my chest and arm, scalding my skin and soaking my blouse. The smell of burnt liquid and humiliation filled the air, and for a moment I could only stare, frozen, my heart pounding like a drum. I had spent decades putting this family first. I raised my daughter, nurtured her dreams, and welcomed my son-in-law into our home with open arms, hoping he would cherish our family as much as I did. I cooked, cleaned, listened, and gave. Every meal I prepared, every word of encouragement I offered, was meant to weave our lives together in love and respect. And yet here he was, flinging not just coffee, but disrespect, right in my face. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, not trusting my voice. My daughter appeared, shock written across her face, but her glance toward me betrayed the confusion and fear she felt. She loved him, or thought she did, and perhaps could not see the truth yet. I stood there, dripping coffee, trembling with a mixture of rage, hurt, and disbelief. The betrayal cut deeper than the burn on my skin. I had tolerated small slights before, an impatient tone, a dismissive comment, an eye roll here and there, but this was different. This was deliberate. This was meant to humiliate me, to assert dominance over someone he saw as beneath him. And yet, as anger boiled beneath my chest, a strange clarity began to form. I realized that my tears were not a sign of weakness. They were proof that I had given my heart fully to people who did not yet understand its value. Something inside me shifted that day, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I would not be broken by this. I cleaned myself in silence, my hands shaking, the morning light catching the streaks of coffee on the counter. I resolved then and there that I would not let this moment define me. If he thought he could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, he was gravely mistaken. Because sometimes the quietest hearts hold the fiercest storms, and mine was just beginning to rise. That night, after the house finally fell silent, I sat alone in my favorite chair by the window, staring out at the dark Tennessee sky. The hills were shrouded in shadows, and the cool night air drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I had always found comfort in these quiet moments, the ones where the world slowed and I could breathe. But tonight my mind was restless, replaying the morning's humiliation over and over. I had spent my life giving love, giving care, giving my very soul to my family, expecting nothing more than respect in return. Yet, as the steaming coffee had splashed against me, I realized how little my son-in-law appreciated my efforts, how quickly he dismissed years of devotion, how easily he assumed it was my duty to serve, to bend, to remain silent while he demanded. A mixture of sorrow and simmering anger stirred in me, but beneath it, beneath the hurt, something else began to emerge, clarity. I understood then that strength was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, deliberate, and patient. And I had it, more than he could ever imagine. I began to reflect on my life, the challenges I had faced and overcome. Widowhood, financial struggles, heartbreaks I had quietly endured. All had shaped me. They had taught me that no one could break me unless I allowed it. And I would not allow it now. Not him, not anyone. Revenge is a word often misunderstood. It doesn't always mean violence. Sometimes it is far more satisfying when it is clever, subtle, and just. I would reclaim my dignity. I would expose his arrogance and cruelty, not with shouts or fights, but with quiet, undeniable proof that the truth could not be hidden. I began noticing the little things, the way he belittled others, how he spoke to my daughter when he thought no one was listening, the half-truths he spread to make himself appear better than he was. Each slight, each unfair word became a piece of a puzzle, a road map for the justice I would eventually claim. And yet, I knew patience was key. I could not rush. I had learned that storms are strongest when they build slowly, quietly gathering force until they cannot be ignored. And like a storm, I would rise. I would reclaim my voice, my place in the family, my pride. For now, I sat quietly, sipping a new cup of coffee, letting the warmth seep into my hands and heart. The fire within me had only just begun to glow. And when it erupted, it would leave no doubt of the power I carried, the power of a grandmother, a mother, a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. Revenge is often imagined as loud and violent, but the most satisfying revenge is quiet, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. I had spent nights thinking, planning, and observing. Every small slur, every hasty remark he made, every dismissive gesture, each one became a thread I could weave into a tapestry of exposure. I started subtly. At family gatherings, I would comment on little things he did without making it obvious. "It's funny," I said once at a dinner with relatives, "how some people think the world owes them service while they barely lift a finger themselves." My voice was soft, calm, and warm, the kind of tone that makes you lean in. His smirk faltered. Those who heard began to notice, and whispers grew like tiny seeds taking root. I documented incidents carefully, not in a vindictive diary, but in notes I could refer to when needed. His arrogance, the way he belittled my daughter when she tried to speak, the sneers he cast at me, all recorded quietly, meticulously. I didn't need witnesses yet. The proof was mine, undeniable in its precision. Then came the moments to orchestrate. I invited relatives and friends over, subtly steering conversations that highlighted his contradictions. When he bragged about his generosity, I would innocently recount situations that exposed the opposite. When he claimed responsibility for successes, I reminded others of the contributions he ignored. Each time his charm faltered, his authority weakened, and his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Even my daughter, who had been blind to his cruelty, began noticing the inconsistencies. I watched silently as realization dawned in her eyes, her trust in him beginning to waver. She didn't need me to say a word. Truth has a way of revealing itself, quietly but powerfully. And then the day arrived when his arrogance could no longer hide. At a family gathering, he attempted to assert control, to belittle me as he had before. But I remained calm, composed, radiant with the quiet dignity he could never take away. With measured words and gentle laughter, I reminded the room of the times he had spoken over others, dismissed their efforts, and treated family like servants. The effect was electric. Faces turned, whispers began, and the room shifted. He tried to argue, to regain control, but no one listened. The charm, the intimidation, the false authority, it all evaporated. For the first time, he was powerless, exposed not by anger, not by retaliation, but by patience, clarity, and truth. And I realized something profound. Revenge is sweetest when it restores your own dignity. I hadn't stooped to cruelty. I hadn't flung coffee or yelled. I had risen above, and in doing so, I had regained my power, and earned respect that could never be taken away. Morning broke over the hills of Tennessee like a promise. The sky was painted with gold and pink, and the air carried the gentle scent of dew-soaked grass. I stepped onto the porch, my favorite mug of coffee warming my hands, and for the first time in weeks, I felt an unshakable calm. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind clarity, strength, and a sense of justice quietly earned. The events of the past weeks had changed the household in ways no one could ignore. My daughter, once blind to the cracks in her husband's charm, had begun to see him for what he truly was. I watched her quietly, understanding her mix of relief and sadness. It was painful to see her hurt, but it was also healing. She needed the truth, even if it came wrapped in betrayal. I had learned that revenge is not merely about punishing others. It is about reclaiming yourself. In exposing his arrogance and cruelty, I had restored my own dignity piece by piece. I had not yelled, I had not lashed out. Instead, I had acted with patience, intelligence, and grace, letting truth speak for itself. The effect was more powerful than any act of anger could have been. Family gatherings became lighter. Conversations flowed without the weight of fear or tension. The son-in-law, once arrogant and commanding, now moved through the house with a cautious humility, aware that his false power had crumbled. Respect, I realized, is earned through consistency, patience, and integrity, qualities he had consistently ignored, and which I had quietly demonstrated in abundance. I found myself reflecting on my life and realizing how resilient I truly was. Every hardship I had faced, widowhood, financial struggles, illness, loss, had prepared me for this moment. I had discovered a quiet strength I didn't know I possessed, one that allowed me to turn humiliation into empowerment, cruelty into clarity, and betrayal into self-respect. And yet, despite all this, I still carried love in my heart for my daughter, for the family I had nurtured, and even, in some distant way, for him. I didn't need to hate him. I only needed to reclaim my place, my dignity, and my peace, and I had done that. As I sipped my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my hands and chest, I smiled softly. Life in Tennessee would continue to be messy, full of challenges and surprises, but I was ready. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably grounded in my own power. Sometimes the fiercest storms bring the brightest clarity, and I had found mine quiet, strong, and entirely my own.